What's up, everybody? Matt Kajeski here, back again with the Odd Shopper channel. And today we're talking college football prize picks. Before we get started, make sure to hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you know when this and all other content goes live. And of course, we're brought to you by PrizePicks. As you'll see, we are making lineups of player props, overs, unders, touchdowns, passing yards, whatever you can think of, they have it. And it's not just college football. They have NFL, NBA, NHL, and you can mix and match those props within the same lineup. So if you're an expert in multiple sports, feel free to mix college football with, say, NHL. And if you click the link in the video description below, you'll get a first match deposit bonus up to $100 and your first month of Stokastic Plus Platinum free. So make sure to check out PrizePicks. And we're going to do just that, bringing you over to the board, talking some college football props. There's a couple rushing ones I like this weekend for the conference championships, and we'll mix and match the Friday and the Saturday games. We're going to kick things off with the Friday game. It's Austin Jones of USC, over 87.5 rushing yards. We actually jumped on this earlier this week at 80.5 rushing yards in our premium Discord. If you'd like to check that out, it's me, all of the Stokastic guys talking our favorite bets, not just college football, either cross sports. Ben Raza, he's in there, Eitan, everyone, Laffy. And your first week's free. You can click the link in the video description below to check that out if you'd like. Hop on these lines early with us. But there's still some meat on the bone here for Austin Jones taking on Utah. I think there's a misconception with the Utah defense that it's one of these elite units, and historically they have been. But this year they've taken a massive step back, and it's been reflected in a lot of their rushing production allowed. Like, this team actually ranks 78th in run defense in the country. And Austin Jones, he might not be a household name, but he's the player that took over for Travis Dye following the injury. So we look at this game environment. We know the matchup is good. USC is a slight favorite here, 2.5 points, 3 in some spots. And it's just Austin Jones in the backfield. Last two games, 21 carries and 25 carries. Just a ridiculous workload for Jones. He's been efficient. And he's playing about 85% of the snaps too. So it is his role and his role alone. Nobody else seeing time here. So with Utah's defense showing cracks on the ground, the run game committing to Austin Jones, and then the game environment suiting him as well, this is a bet towards the over, even at 87.5, still like it here. Going to our second one, we're going to stick with some rushing props, and we're going to get a little crazy. Will Howard over 4.5. Another one, it's funny, we jumped on this on Wednesday, I believe it was, in our premium Discord at 3.5, and it's moved. And now this isn't going to move a ton, but there's still some value on 4.5 here. Will Howard has a decent career with Kansas State, showing mobility. So this year, you look at his game logs, he only has one game in double digits in terms of rushing yards, but he has none below 0. So he's not a guy who's taking sacks, which is important. And I looked at his designed rush attempts, because that's key for a quarterback when you're talking rushing props. If they're just scrambling and taking sacks, I mean, there's a lot more volatility. But 2, 5, and 3 designed rush attempts the last 3 games for Will Howard. In one of those games, the one where he only had 2, Adrian Martinez tried to play. So, I mean, Will Howard does get designed rush attempts. In the 2 previous seasons, he's played partially, and he had 364 yards in 2020. That's 4.7 yards per carry. And he had 184 yards last year. That's 5.8 yards per carry. So, I mean, we're buying really low on a guy who's averaged more yards per carry than his prop in his career. So this is one I think we can hit. He gets designed rush attempts. He's not Adrian Martinez. We have to get that through our heads first and foremost. The offense changes a little bit under him, but they still will use Will Howard as a rusher. So I'm going to continue buying this. I think 4.5 is completely fine here on the over. Next one, we're going to hit another rushing prop. This one is to the under. We grabbed Saya Bangura, Ohio's lead running back, under 105.5 in our premium Discord. 99.5 is the line now. We're going under. I think this one is still playable here. Ohio has feasted on some low-caliber competition in recent games to Bangura's benefit. And Bangura, he's going to have a solid role here. He's been consistently carrying the ball 20 times, but efficiency is a major worry. Toledo, their opponent, is the best defense in the MAC, and it is not close. This team is 7th in seventh in coverage, 17th in pass rush, and 12th in run defense. Excellent defensive line here for Toledo. And then we look to the spread in the game. Ohio is a slight underdog. It is 2 points. A lot of the reason it's so short is just quarterbacks. DeQuan Finn's been banged up. I mean, Ohio doesn't have their signal caller. So Toledo might just decide to load the box here, ride what should be an Ohio run game and try to stop that. And that makes sense. So right now, in terms of projection, it's also a math play. You look at the total in the game, it's 55 points. Ohio's implied team total is 26.5. There's not projected to be a ton of efficiency here. Not only is it a tough matchup, but mathematically, it just does not line up for Saya Bangura, eclipsing this rushing total more often than not. So we're going to go under Bangura at 99.5 rush yards. Next one, we'll pivot over to the receiving game. Fun game here on Friday night in the Conference USA Championship. And we've got an excellent player prop here in Joshua Cephas over 66.5 yards receiving. This is a really fun one. It's been a three-headed monster for UTSA all season at receiver. Unfortunately for them, they lost to Corian Clark. Fortunately for us, we can take advantage of this in the prop markets. Now, this prop is down, and there's a reason why. UTSA was locked into the Conference USA title game no matter what happened last week, and UTEP ran up the score on them. UTSA ended up rallying back, but they did not need to use their premier receivers, and Joshua Cephas only had 4 targets. He actually only has 6 combined targets over the last 2 games, but on the year, he averages 8.4. He averages 74.1 yards per game, nearly 10 yards more than his prop, and now the game environment has a 70-point total. UTSA is a 9-point favorite. Their implied team total is nearly 40 points. This just flat out doesn't make sense. The line is off maybe by 20 yards here, in my opinion. Frank Harris averages about 295 pass yards per game. We just removed one of the premier alphas from the offense in Corian Clark. Now there's 2. It's Zachary Franklin and Cephas. I think they're both underpriced here, but Cephas, there's more value on his prop than there is on the Franklin one. Absurd that this hasn't moved, in my opinion. We'll continue to smash the over. We took 66.5, and the line has not budged egregiously. All right, moving on. The last one I don't have a strong take. The 5th one in our Discord was O'Connell for Purdue. He's not on the board anymore. Off the field circumstances have prevented his prop. There's a couple we took that aren't really the same value anymore. We took an over on Austin Ani over 220.5. We took an under on Cam Rising 270.5. And that's the one I'm going to talk about because it's moved a little bit, but not enough. And this one's risky. So it's not one I would lock in. And we'll talk about how you play PrizePicks in a second here. But if you want to play a 5th, I think Rising is going to be my 5th and an under. There's a couple reasons why. You might remember the first game against USC for Cam Rising. Well, turns out he absolutely feasted and had the best game of his season, threw for over 400 yards in that game on 44 attempts, complete shootout. Outside of that, Cam Rising hasn't even eclipsed 300 yards in a game, let alone his prop here. We could go how many times he's eclipsed that because it's actually only twice this season where he's been above the listed 268.5 against UCLA and against Cal. So right away, there is some risk because the one time he eclipsed this prop, it was against Cal, and that was easily his best game of the year by almost 150 yards. But on the year, he's actually been a semi-low volume passer. Cam Rising only averages 239 yards per game. So this is entirely matchup driven, which makes sense to some degree. But we project yardage as the Stokastic team does based on the total, based on the game script, based on the game environment. And Utah here, 32.25 implied team total. Rising still projects slightly below this. So we're talking 250 range for Rising, 240 range, which gives some value on the under here. Not as much as some of the other props, and I think it comes with added volatility because USC does have a poor defense, and they do allow a lot of production, and Rising's already shown it. So there is some risk here, which why it's the 5th. If you wanted to pivot like to an Ani owner or some over or something like that, wouldn't hate it either. But to speak on PrizePicks, if you run 5 out there, you're automatically getting locked into the flex play. But if you want to use 4 or 3, you have a decision to make. You either hit the power play where you need to get every prop correct. When you use 4, that's going to pay you 10x. And when you use 4 and you choose the flex play, which is your other option, you can still get all 4 correct in 5x, but you also have a little wiggle room. If you only get 3, you still 1.5x. So that's the cool thing about using 3 and 4. You have some choices to make. I still like using 5. You guys know me. I like to go all the way. And 10x potentially. So there we are, PrizePicks, awesome platform. That's how we play it. And those are the top 5 on the board today. To recap, well, this is over, excuse me. Cam Rising under 268.5 passing yards. Joshua Cephas for UTSA over 66.5 receiving. Saya Bangura under 99.5 rushing yards for Ohio. Will Howard over 4.5 rushing yards for Kansas State, and Austin Jones, USC running back, over 87.5 rushing yards. Hit the thumbs up button on the way out. Subscribe to the channel. Those both help us a ton. And if you've done that, thank you. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think about these props. Would love to hear. And you can reach out to me on Twitter at @bet_Kajeski if you'd like. Otherwise, we'll be back during bowl season, so don't go anywhere. Until then, good luck, and we will see you later.
Very loud music. Is that on my end? Or is that okay. Like, what is going on here? Welcome to Stokastic's On the Contrary. I'm your host, Neil Orfield. You can find me on Twitter at PlayerQDFS. I'm joined by two DFS goats as usual. Alex Baker is here. You can find him on Twitter at AwesomoDFS. And today we're also joined by Steve Buzzard. You can find him on Twitter at Steve Buzzard. And this show is sponsored by PrizePicks, which offers daily prop-based contests. While you're coming in, please do hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We have a lot of great content that you won't want to miss. Steve, I would like to say have yourself a year, but really like have yourself a decade. You've just been crushing DFS for so long now, but recently your streak has been pretty incredible this year. How does it feel to be just unstoppable?
Well, that's been I've been really hot on NBA for sure. This is an NFL show, so hopefully we could get some of that run coming over to NFL. But yeah, it's been nice to have some extra bankroll and NBA to help out with the NFL streets. And NFL season's been an okay one, but not nearly as good. So it's been a wild season. So it feels like every week there's a handful of people. Last week was Josh Jacobs or Justin Fields the weeks before that just like you have to have type guys. So hopefully we can find who those have to have guys are to go this week.
I'm confident that you guys can find those have to have guys. Yeah, I was going to ask you, Steve. I mean, I think of NFL as being your like top sport. I mean, you've been crushing a lot of different sports for many years now, but NFL, you obviously won the Millie in. And would you say NFL is typically your best sport in DFS overall?
Yeah, that's a good question. It feels like it just bounces around enough that I feel like it's pretty much there between MLB, NBA, and NFL, and maybe throw MMA in there as well. But they're all kind of similar. If you use our tools, then you're probably going to do pretty well at most of them. As long as you get your process right. Yeah. And I think they'll be good. I just need to work on golf and get better at that. That one I can confidently say is not my best one.
Yeah, me too. That's I have negative ROI by a good amount in PGA. I probably asked you that same question when you're on high stakes season one, but anyway,
go back and see what I answered there.
Well, yeah, maybe you answered differently at that time. Alex, you just last week took down the Spy. It was a single entry contest for $100,000. How's your NFL season going?
Thanks, man. It's going a lot better after last week, I can tell you that. So, um, it was actually a really encouraging week because like it seemed like the chalk stacks had just been hitting week after week, and Mike White like kind of came out of nowhere and had a pretty impressive performance. It just gave me enough faith in keeping the contrarian strategy going here. So that was pretty nice. And in case you guys were wondering, my best sport is Counter-Strike Global Offensive.
I wasn't one. I knew that Counter-Strike Global Offensive was your favorite, so I didn't even have to ask you. Yeah, so I mentioned that you took down the Spy. I believe I read that you took down actually several tournaments last weekend. I did not see what all of those were, but yeah, you've also been. I've seen you've won in Showdown and lots of other spots as well in NFL. So definitely having a great year so far.
Thanks, man. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I got the third in the Millie Maker, the $20,
Oh,
and
that's right. I saw
that's
that.
my highest finish ever in that. So that like it wasn't like the biggest prize, but like it definitely was exciting. And then I feel like that's what we're all trying to win is like that huge Millie Maker. So still
Yeah,
trying to get my first one.
winning that high buy-in Millie Maker not enough for you. So you gotta keep chasing that one as well. So I need to warn you guys, my entire screen is frozen. I have a black screen right now on my computer. I had been having technical difficulties about an hour ago. They seem to go away and they are back again. So I'm concerned that I'm going to cut out at any moment. But Alex, I'm confident that you would be able to carry the show if I have to step away, if my computer craps out on me, since you do the show every week. But we'll start where we usually start, Alex, with just general strategy. Do you have any general strategy thoughts on this slate that's any different than any other slate, or is this just kind of run of the mill?
Well, the thing that's really jumping out at me is this Jacksonville Detroit game, and it looks like everyone's like a really good value. Like the team totals are very high, but I think it's like a game fade can be as good a strategy as a game stack because of all the correlations. So I'm kind of interested in maybe going a little bit off the board because this is such an obvious spot that like both defenses are kind of bad, like, and then both teams have some pretty good offensive players. So that's kind of the defining thing I'm seeing of this slate.
Yeah, and I remember last year you fading games that were like smash spots, like Chiefs and another great offense, both bad defenses, 55-point total, and you faded those games. That went really well. So it feels like it'd be safer to fade this Lions Jaguars game than that kind of game.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely feels better since neither team is particularly good. So
Right.
that's definitely part of the thought process. Of course, sometimes the game fade just means you're under on certain players. So we'll see how it all shakes out. But like, it seems like everybody's kind of gravitating towards that game.
And then Steve, I'll ask you the same question. Do you have any general strategy points about this game that are about this week that are different than any other slate?
I don't know if like a lot different than the other slate, but I think the thing that's interesting, and it's kind of been the same case a lot this year, is just the pricing, especially on DraftKings, is pretty tight. So we have a couple of games like Kansas City, Cincinnati, that has a really high total, but it's really hard to build lineups with all the players that you want from that game. So I think it'll be really interesting on how people go about either stacking that game if they play just like, say, a couple guys like Kelsey or T. Higgins or whoever that, or how they want to do that, because it is really hard to build stacks with Mahomes and Juju and Kelsey and run it back, and it's you're going to have to really your lineup elsewhere really suffers quite a bit. So I think that's kind of where I think is going to be kind of one of the interesting things. Same thing with Fields as well. Like it's tough to if he's 100% go, it's really tough to kind of build some of those lineups also. So I don't know.
Yeah.
That'll be pretty interesting.
Yeah, especially tough with Fields with the running aspect of his game. It's very different. I'm pulling up my other laptop so I can hopefully, even with the black screen on my main computer, got my other laptop next to me so I can kind of look at our tools there. I think we can continue, and hopefully this computer won't completely crash out. All right, so Alex, we'll move on to quarterbacks. And Steve, I didn't even tell you what the format of the show is. You might know, but I'm going to ask you for fades among the chalk. I'm going to ask you for fades and chalk you're willing to eat, and then I'm going to ask you for some contrarian options. So at each position, but I'll start with Alex here at quarterback. Alex, looking at the top of our projected ownership, any chalk that you're willing to eat or major fades for you?
Well, the major fade I think would be Jared Goff. It's just like I'm feeling really dumb about this because it's like literally our top stack in the top stack tool. So maybe not the greatest idea, but it's just like the Lions are quite a run first team. So it's a stack where I'm a little bit worried that if they get up in the game, if they have success early, they're gonna just run the ball a lot. So it's never a great sign. But Amon-Ra St. Brown is a great play. So it's kind of pulling me in the opposite direction. But if Jared Goff's going to be very popular this week, that would be a possible fade for me.
And then Steve, I will ask you same question. Quarterbacks, chalk that you're willing to eat or major fades for you?
Yeah, so I think the one that I'm having a hard time with is Joe Burrow from a fade perspective, or like that I'm more interested to fade probably. It looks like just for a lot of the reasons that I mentioned earlier, I think it's really tough to stack up that game in the way that I would want to. Like if I'm playing Burrow, it feels like, I'm going to want to play Chase or Higgins and run it back with Kelsey or Juju. And it just gets really, really tough to get there. So I think that's pretty scary to do because they're going to likely be trailing and passing a lot. If Jamar Chase is out, then I think it actually kind of makes Burrow a little bit more interesting because of the fact that he can be his targets are going to be a little bit more narrow instead of spread out a little bit. So I do have some reasoning that I might change things around there potentially a little bit. It might even like give T. Higgins a little bit of a boost because of Chase being out for a while and maybe not being quite as 100% like it feels like most people are kind of projecting him to be. So that said, I still think I'm kind of not super heavy on Burrow or Mahomes. Mahomes isn't super popular on DraftKings anyways, so maybe I'll do a lot of my playing of Mahomes over on FanDuel. It looks like he's right up the top of ownership there, but I could probably be more interested to play him there. From who I am interested in on going for on the chalky side is maybe the opposite side of what Alex was saying. I kind of like going with the Trevor Lawrence side, and he is our top owned player right now, but I think he does really good. He checks off a lot of the boxes. He's coming off his best game of the year. He's facing the Lions, who is like, giving up points nonstop all year long. His price is pretty cheap. His stacks are cheap. He's playing in a dome. Zay Jones was the guy that people were really hesitant to play all year long just because he doesn't have any upside. He's kind of like the classic. He doesn't have upside until he does when he ends up in the winning lineups last week. So Christian Kirk has been as consistent as they come. So I think that he looks pretty interesting. If he stays at only 12%, I think I kind of like stacking up those guys. And then you can, and maybe instead of running Goff and those guys, you can kind of run back with some of the Detroit guys there.
So if I'm understanding correctly, you like Trevor Lawrence better because he's coming off his best game. You mentioned that as one factor in his favor. It doesn't scare you that people are going to be chasing that box score a little bit. You think that, he's the form is good, so you want to go there?
I do worry that his ownership will come up over the weekend. So if it does start coming up, I might end up being under the field. But if he's at 12% where we're at now, then I think I'm liking him pretty well.
Okay. And then any other contrarian options that you like this weekend, Steve?
So I think the one that's pretty interesting, let's see, I have a couple here that I think Derek Carr is pretty interesting. I would say that game is actually one of the higher total games on the slate, if not the highest. And Carr is also, he has a really good stack partner with Devontae Adams. Devontae Adams has, been as consistent as you can get all year long. He's had 5 games over 30 points. So he's going to be, a winning lineup type guy almost half the time this season. Also, like Josh Palmer is fine, and as a run back, and DeAndre Carter is a good run back. Keenan Allen, all these guys look like good run backs. It doesn't look like this is getting a lot of steam, interestingly, even though the total is over 50. So maybe this is also could be a little bit of leverage against Josh Jacobs, because I know Jacobs is questionable right now, but assuming he plays, which I think is what it's kind of trending towards, I think a lot of people are going to be on him, including me after last week, and Carr makes a good pivot there as well.
Yeah, he just looks like one of the best running backs in the league right now. Hard to really fade Josh Jacobs. But sticking with quarterbacks, Alex, any other contrarian options that you like at quarterback this week?
Yeah, I mean, Tua Tagovailoa, he's been one of the best quarterbacks in the league this year. No one's on him because the matchup for San Francisco is really tough. So I think I like both sides of this one, where it's like San Francisco facing a really strong offense. Maybe they'll have to pass more than they usually do, which could be beneficial if you have guys like Devo and Christian McCaffrey. And then on the other side with Miami, kind of expensive for the matchup, but huge upside. They're one of the best passing teams in the league. So I could see taking some chances because it looks like no one's on them.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised to see that. So I get it. I mean, I get it because I talked about this with Lofty. I'm like, it's such a tough spot for the Miami offense against this San Francisco defense. But now I'm looking at our top stacks tool, 1.3% projected ownership on Tua. That seems insanely low for somebody who's just been optimal multiple times this year. Clearly has the upside, condensed targets. So that makes a lot of sense to want to go to Miami. Any other contrarian quarterbacks that you want to talk about, Alex?
Well, this guy's not contrarian, but just a reminder that Deshaun Watson is starting this week, so I think that'll be really interesting to see what Cleveland does. I think guys like Amari Cooper and Donovan Peoples-Jones are going to benefit a lot. So their stack is going to be a good play because they're pretty low owned they're low priced for the quarterback switch. And then I'm not really sure how to anticipate how much they're going to pass first run, because it's like a run first team, but then you got like a quarterback like Watson in there. So I think that's one of the biggest question marks this week.
Yeah, definitely going to change things up. And even if you don't go to Deshaun Watson, maybe it makes the receiving options a little bit more interesting. Definitely kind of a tough spot to gauge what to expect there and how you want to play it. Steve, how about you?
Peoples-Jones is Peoples-Jones is kind of really interesting. Like, I don't think his game is fully getting taken advantage of from Brissett. He's more of he doesn't have quite the big arm that Watson has, and we don't know what Watson's arm is like right now. He's been out of the league for a while. So if we just kind of assume he is what he used to be over a year and a half ago now, that's a big risk, but it might be worth paying off. And Peoples-Jones just like has that big play capability. So I think he could be a pretty interesting one.
Yeah, for sure. Any others that you wanted to throw in there? You don't have to if you don't have any that you're.
I think that's good. I do have a question for Alex, if I can host for one question.
Oh yeah.
In regards to Tua, he's like expensive with Tyreek Hill and Waddle as well. How are you thinking about stacking that game? I think that's why he's 1% owned.
I agree. Yeah, it's not a great play, but it's just paying up to be contrarian. So maybe it's really tough to do because there's not a ton of value on the slate yet, and if more players are out, then the ownership will go up. But it's just like this is one of my favorite stacks because of how much they pass. They have, I guess we have them projected for the 4th highest pass rate on the slate, which isn't quite as high as I thought, but yeah, it's one of those things where I like the idea. And maybe when it comes to actually building a lineup, it's not as good as I'm expecting.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Like every time you pay up for those guys, they've kind of it's paid off. So I think it's definitely worthwhile. I'm just trying to think of how best to get Tyreek Hill and those guys. But I mean, Tyreek Hill has as good of upside as Devontae Adams, who I was just talking about. So I think it makes a lot of sense.
Maybe a skinny stack, or Trent Sherfield or Mike Gesicki, maybe. I don't know. Yeah, it does seem like it's definitely going to be tough to fit in the full stack with all the guys you want there. But yeah, maybe once we start building, we'll have a better idea. All right, let's move on to running backs. But first, let me tell you about our great World Cup no-brainer offer from BetMGM for first-time depositors in any state other than New York, Pennsylvania, or Missouri, and any Canadian province other than Ontario. Bet just $10 at BetMGM and you'll win $200 in free bets if any team scores a goal, not just in the game you bet on, but in the entire World Cup. Again, the bet must be a pre-game money line bet on the World Cup. Just click the link in the description of this video to sign up. All right, let's move on to running backs. Alex, I'll start with you once again. We'll look at the chalk of running back. Any chalk that you're willing to eat, or major fades among the chalkier running backs?
Yeah, I mean, Josh Jacobs, he had a killer week. Won a lot of people tournaments, so that I think people are going to go back to the well there. He's still a good play, but it does look like he's the highest owned running back right now, so that's kind of intriguing. I think it's hard to poke too many holes. I think Travis Etienne in that game versus Detroit is going to be a good play. David Montgomery, it looks like, he is just one of the cheaper options, and with no Khalil Herbert, has kind of a high volume for his salary, so I think he's kind of intriguing. Those are all some chalk guys I'd be interested in.
Okay, and then did you have any other major fades there?
It looks like Austin Eckler could be a fade just because at 8,500 he's the second highest price guy, and it's I don't know if he's got quite enough to justify that when you can get guys like Derrick Henry and Josh Jacobs a bit cheaper.
Okay. And Steve, same question for you. Among the chalkier running backs, any chalk that you're willing to eat, or major fades?
Yeah, so in general, just from a game theory perspective, I tend to be more interested in the chalk at running backs. So most of these guys, I think I think in general the reason for that is like the chalk at running back, they just get so many touches that they're more likely to pay off versus a wide receiver or a tight end who are a lot more inconsistent. So most of these guys, I'm pretty interested at the top of the ownership bucket. I think the one that kind of stands out the most that I'm interested in is probably Kenneth Walker. He's maybe a little bit more towards the middle of the bucket, but I think he's just as good as pretty much anyone else. I think that Seattle could definitely get quite a bit ahead of the Rams and rely pretty heavily on Walker for the rest of the game. The only question will be if they need him to play the whole game. Not that I want to predict the huge blowouts, but that the Rams offense just looks really bad right now. So I don't know how they're going to keep up a lot of points. So that would be the only risk, but I would have to imagine that they're going to rely on Walker quite a bit. And I've had a lot of disappointment with Kenneth Walker this year after Rinpack stole him in our season-long league with a $100 bid that I also bid on. But this will be another week for him to pay off for that as well. So
is this Stokastic A League, by the way, that you're talking about?
Yeah, with my terrible team in there, but it would have been so much better with Walker.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Yeah, I'm in the B League. I named my team passing through to A League and started off so hot. Had I think the highest points scored through 6 weeks, and now all of my team is hurt. Sob story. It's a 14-team league. There's nobody nobody you can pick up. So my team's pretty much dead, and I'm gonna have to change my name because I'm clearly not passing through to C League instead. Okay, so you like Kenneth Walker among the chalk. You generally like all of these chalk options. We got a question about Nick Chubb, who is kind of borderline chalk. And I'll go to you, Steve, here. So we've talked about how Deshaun Watson is returning. We don't really know what to make of that situation, how it's going to affect the running game. What is your level of interest in Nick Chubb, who we have projected for 8.6% ownership?
Yeah, Nick Chubb is like, he's a tough one for me. It feels like I never get to him, and he always ends up doing well. I spent a lot of time this offseason just thinking, especially after like Derrick Henry blew up every slate last year, of am I undervaluing the upside of all of these running backs that can just get so many touchdowns and stuff. And I did make some adjustments to that, and I'm playing guys like Derrick Henry a bit more often this year, but still, like, Chubb still like prices so high and doesn't catch enough passes, and that I very rarely am able to get to Chubb, and he still does well. But yeah, I'm thinking that I'm probably not going to play Chubb too much, and I'm sure it'll bite me again.
Yeah, and our tools, which you might be familiar with, these Stokastic tools, don't really love Nick Chubb. We have him at 8.6% ownership, 2.9% chance of being optimal. That was a joke for anybody who doesn't know. These are the guys who do the tools for Stokastic, very involved in the projections. Alex, how about you? Let's talk about some contrarian running backs. Who do you like there?
Contrarian. I think Antonio Gibson is the guy that's kind of popping off on the tools, where he's one of the cheapest running backs. Seems like Brian Robinson has been getting he's been getting a bulk of the running work. He doubled up Antonio Gibson's touches last week on the ground, but that has been very volatile, where if you go back 2 weeks, Antonio Gibson had more touches, and then Antonio Gibson has been leading in routes significantly at 60% to 30% last game. So I think Antonio Gibson is probably your best bet in the backfield in Washington, and no one's really on him, so I'm pretty intrigued.
He is, I believe, questionable currently. He's been I think he did not practice yesterday, but I may have the last update I saw was in the morning, and they were saying we'll probably have more information tonight. So maybe there has been an update since then, but yeah, we'll have to keep an eye on his status. But yeah, Antonio Gibson, 5,200. Just looking at the boom bust tool, we've got him at 6.5% ownership, 16.6% chance of being optimal. So if he's healthy, sign me up for some Antonio Gibson. That's a good point, that it's been not really consistent who gets the usage there. Any other contrarian running backs you want to talk about, Alex, or should I throw it back to Steve?
Yeah. So just a note on that is, yeah, sometimes if players are questionable, if they trend in the right direction, maybe that ownership will go up. So I wouldn't be surprised to see it go up. Another guy in the same vein is kind of Najee Harris, who he left at halftime last game with an injury. They've been saying it's not quite that bad. So if he's back in this week, it looks like he could go at a pretty low ownership.
And then what about this? So M. Bruno in chat says Gibson seems likely to not play. I don't think we know that for sure, but I also, again, as I said, may have missed an update. But if Gibson is ruled out, Alex, would you then have interest in Brian Robinson?
Yeah, I think that Brian Robinson, they do have Jonathan Williams, who's kind of the RB3, and I kind of wonder if Robinson would get a ton more receiving routes, because it seems like the team doesn't like to use him in that capacity. But I think it would be beneficial to Robinson. He'll probably get, a good amount of touches, but I'm not sure if he adds enough in the receiving game to really be a huge shock play for me. But I think he'll be a good play if Antonio Gibson's out.
Okay. And then Steve, same question for you. Any other contrarian running backs that you want to throw out there?
Yeah, I'll put out a couple. So I think Latavius Murray looks pretty interesting. So he was pretty much a true workhorse last week with 68% of the rushing attempts. He was on the field for 64% of the dropbacks. Those are numbers that are up there with any of the elite types of running backs in the league, outside of just like the very, very top, like CMC or something. So like if he was a normal running back, he would definitely be way more than his current price. The problem is he didn't have a huge game with that, so that's going to keep his ownership in check. He was 13 for 92, and he only caught one ball for 6 yards. But I think a lot of people are pretty scared about the Denver offense, including myself. But if he gets all those touches, there's a possibility that he could easily break a big play, or they could be in the red zone and getting those touches as well. So I think for a cheap price, I think he looks pretty good. And then if I want to talk about two guys that I think are kind of interesting, really deep sleepers, I mentioned I play the very chalkier running backs, but I might give these guys a little bit of a chance. Isaiah Pacheco, he is getting all of the goal line work, getting a lot of carries right now. He's kind of like Chubb, very light, maybe not even Chubb light, but he is, a guy that's getting the ball on the ground so much that I could really see a way that he could kind of spoil some of the stacks for Mahomes or for Burrow. And so I think that gives him some nice upside. And plus, he could easily score 2 touchdowns. Like if the Chiefs are putting up a lot of points and he just gets the ball near the end zone a couple of times, he could easily have a couple of touchdowns. And at his price point, I think he could be pretty interesting. And then the other guy that I wanted to mention is Kyren Williams on the Rams. So I don't know that even a lot of people know who this guy is, but I think he could be pretty sneaky. The Rams have pretty much said all year long that they don't like Akers. He's not really been a big part of their plan. And even with that, they got rid of Henderson this last week. So now that Williams has been on the IR for a good part of the year, and it kind of almost feels like a lot of their dislike of Cam Akers and their getting rid of Henderson is someone that they're going to be interested to get to Williams and give him a chance to see what he can do down the stretch this season. So he ran a route on 70% of their dropbacks last week. Actually, last 2 weeks he did that, and there's a pretty good chance that they're going to be playing from behind again. The only question will be if they are able to put up points. We talked about that. Their offense is really not in a very good spot right now. So he could easily bust and not really do much of anything, but it feels like he's going to have the opportunity to get there. It's kind of in the same way that that I was mentioning with Latavius Murray. And to be honest, I do prefer Murray over him, but I think that he's a guy that, at a similar price point, you can take some shots at.
Yeah, Kyren Williams is a guy that I brought up maybe last week or 2 weeks ago because they had gotten rid of Darrell Henderson. And it seems like they should want to try new things with their running game. It's just been so bad all year. Why not throw in the new guy, let him play a little bit more. And yeah, I think it's probably only a matter of time before Kyren Williams has a game, at least a useful game. Maybe not, but I would expect at some point, like he's going to take over this backfield. Seems like a pretty good spot against this Seahawks defense that's 19th against the rush. If he's going to have it in any game, it seems like this one seems pretty good. And then, Pacheco, we saw had a pretty nice grab in the last game. And they've been saying that they want to get him more involved, that he, could be more involved in the passing game. We haven't really seen it yet. Do you think that we're going to see that anytime soon, Steve?
So I don't know that it feels like maybe they're going to a little bit, but they never started to really get CEH involved in it that much. So I kind of feel like they want to use him in that same role where he's not super heavily involved. But certainly if he gets even a couple of grabs, I think that is well worth it. And it's pretty disappointing for Kyren Williams. I would really love to see how he does this week if they had their full offense with Kupp and Stafford as well. But alas, we have what we have. Yeah,
that would be helpful if he had pieces around him that would allow him to, a little bit more flexibility in moving around, not have the defense totally focused on him. One more name I want to throw at you, Steve. People in chat, somebody in chat brought up Zonovan Knight. I think Michael Carter is looking like he's doubtful to play. Will you have any interest in Zonovan Knight this week, assuming that Michael Carter is out?
Yeah, I think if Carter is out, he definitely looks pretty reasonable. He's only 4,600 on DraftKings, so that's even a big discount versus some of the guys I was just talking about, and 5,800 on FanDuel, also a very big discount. So I think he looks like a pretty good guy, and he's someone that could help you build out some of those Tua and Waddle or Tyreek stacks. So I think that's pretty interesting. Certainly, he dominated the workload last week. I don't think he will do that again because James Robinson was in a healthy scratch last week, and clearly they wouldn't do that without Michael Carter. So I think their plan last week was probably not to go as heavy on Michael Carter as like some of us thought would have been the case, because even as the game started, Knight was involved more than expected, even like before Carter got hurt. Carter could have been dealing with some like nagging injuries, which ended up making him get hurt more right from the get-go, and maybe that was why he was coming in and out, but I don't think so. I think Knight was probably more of a plan than what we were thinking. So I will take some shots. I think that this game is a pretty interesting one. It's in the Dome, and in Minnesota Minnesota does okay on putting up points. The Jets are doing okay on putting up points. When you have two teams that are, decent at it, I think it'll be pretty good. And we saw that Mike White is a nice improvement over Darnold too. So hopefully that will continue.
I was going to say part of the reason that we liked Michael Carter last weekend is because last year there was a trend for Mike White to target his running backs. I didn't actually see how many targets Zonovan Knight. I'm trying to pull that up here. It's normally I'm faster at this stuff when I have my computer working. But does that factor into your desire to play Zonovan Knight, the fact that Mike White is quarterback?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, he had 3 catches for 34 yards. I don't have his targets in front of me right now, but I mean that's certainly a worthwhile endeavor for his price point. I mean, he could easily get there on a couple of catches.
Yeah, I think that's certainly helpful. Okay. Any other contrarian running backs you want to talk about, Steve? Or we cover all of them?
I think those are the main guys that I'm interested in.
Okay, Alex, any more for you?
I mean, all of them always. The low end guys we're always trying to add as many as we can, but so far, it doesn't seem like there's a ton to choose from.
Yeah, and as we've said multiple times already, we running back is often the spot where you want to play the chalk. So, we've named a few, and that's probably enough because a lot of the time we're just going to be playing the chalkier running backs anyway. So we can move on to wide receivers. But first, let me tell you about our sponsor, PrizePicks. PrizePicks offers daily prop-based contests. There are no sharks optimizers or mass entries available on PrizePicks. It's just 5-player lineups where you can net up to 10x your entry fee. Use your knowledge of multiple sports with cross-sports entries. This is the right time of the year for that with NFL, NBA, NHL, I guess, World Cup, all these sports going on at once. You can use your knowledge of all of them across single entries. Click the link in the description below to get 1 free month of Stokastic plus Platinum and up to a $100 deposit match bonus when you sign up and make a deposit with PrizePicks. Alex, you know the drill here. Now, normally, I'm going to grab my phone. Do you have any PrizePicks off the top of your head that you like, or should I pull some up and ask you specific questions?
Oh, I'm gonna be looking for that Zonovan Knight one to come up because I do feel like it's not really going to change that much from last week because of James Robinson kind of being in the mix. So that's going to be interesting. Nick Chubb is someone that I'm big on the unders for this week because I just feel like they're not going to rush as much with Deshaun Watson at QB. A little bit scary because they are big favorites versus Houston, but I could see that going under.
90.5 rushing yards is the line for Nick Chubb. I can't find
Nice.
anything on Zonovan Knight so far.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect Zonovan Knight to be up yet, but it's like you gotta get the prop when it comes out. So just keep looking for that. Aside for that, yeah, I think that's my top one.
Okay. The fade of Nick Chubb and then looking for Zonovan Knight. What about you, Steve? So we've got Latavius Murray. You said you like him. 54.5 rushing yards. What do you think of that line?
So let me check here really quick. I think that one feels like probably not too bad. I would probably going to say that I will go over that one slightly. I just think he's going to get a lot of attempts this week. I don't think it's like egregiously bad, but I feel like I will go slightly over that one.
Okay. And then Alex, how about 65 and a half receiving yards on Amari Cooper? I mean, it seems like it's pretty volatile because we don't really know what to expect with Deshaun Watson back. Is that just a fade spot for you when you just really don't know what to make of, the quarterback coming in, playing together for the first time? Would you just not try to attempt doing this Amari Cooper line of 65 and a half receiving yards, or is that something that you want to target because we don't really know what to expect?
Yeah, that's definitely one that I'd probably not bet just because I kind of think it's about right where with Watson, you expect him to have a pretty good receiving yard average. So one that I'm under, I'm not sure if this is on PrizePicks, but DJ Shark, where I just feel like he hasn't played very well this year. And Josh Reynolds, like he's kind of coming back from injury last week, didn't play much, but I feel like the wide receiver playing time is a little bit up in the air right now in Detroit with all the injuries. So all the injuries they had before. So
yeah,
I'm kind of looking at DJ Shark as under the props.
It's 40.5 receiving yards is the line on DJ Shark. You want to take the under there?
Definitely, yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, I think that I agree. That one sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's just been playing really bad this year. So like
Yeah.
I'm surprised they want to play him at all, to be honest.
Yeah, he's I've got him on a good number of best ball teams, so I hope they keep trying to force him to happen. All right, I have one question from chat that I want to ask before we move on to wide receivers about the Pittsburgh running back situation. So if we get news that Najee Harris is out, I'll start with you, Alex. Do you have any opinion on Jaylen Warren? Would you have any interest in Jaylen Warren or Benny Snell? Do you have any idea what you would do with the Pittsburgh backfield if we get news that Najee Harris is not going to play?
Yeah, I think Warren would be a great play just because, I mean, we saw Snell and McFarland have success last week, but Warren was out. So I expect if he's back that he'd just be kind of in that Najee Harris role if Najee's out. So I think that's one injury to keep an eye on.
Yeah, definitely a great spot against the Falcons. Steve, do you see it any different?
Yeah, I think Jaylen Warren is going to blow up the slate since I'm going to have to start him in my Osmo league. So, yeah, no, he's been playing ahead of Benny Snell all year long. So, and if you listen to the beat writers from Pittsburgh, they've been pretty high on Jaylen Warren. There was talk like that Warren would, he was even like cutting into Najee Harris's time and may even be like starting over Najee Harris. So I don't think, I don't see Snell or McFarland like leapfrogging him after this one game.
Okay. All right, let's move on to wide receivers. Alex, I'll start with you. Looking at the chalk, any chalk that you're willing to eat or major fades among the chalky wide receivers?
Yeah, I mean, Amon-Ra St. Brown is kind of the chalk receiver, and I think I'm going to play him. Just like I know I said I don't love stacking up Detroit, but part of that's just because St. Brown's really the only option that I like on the team. And yeah, I think with Jacksonville, like there's a lot of potential here. So that's definitely a guy I'm going to be high on. But I also do feel like his ownership could creep up. So and then Zay Jones could be the fade where he's just coming off a really big week. And I think people are going to want to play him on account of that. Or, I mean, Christian Kirk is about the same ownership. You got to pay more, but definitely, I feel like Zay Jones might not be the safest. I mean, I guess I always want to go for the long shots after they had a bad week, not week.
Okay. Yeah, Zay Jones, 4,900. The price tag, I think that's higher than we've typically seen on Zay Jones. Obviously, the matchup is great against Detroit, but yeah, that makes sense to not want to necessarily jam him in there if the field is going to chasing the last box score. What about you, Steve? Any chalk that you're willing to eat or major fades among the chalk?
Yeah, so the one that I'm interested in right now, although I want to really watch his ownership over this weekend, is Garrett Wilson. So at his current ownership, I think he looks pretty good. He's almost the highest guy. He got a big increase off of last week. The reason why I kind of worried about him a little bit though on his ownership is just like when you're so chalky last week and then doing well, it feels like he's going, even though his price is up, it feels like people aren't even going to care that his price is up, and they're just going to jam him in. So I want to really watch to see how people are touting him over the rest of the weekend. If they start really talking him up, then maybe I'll start to shy away. But right now, I think he looks pretty good. The one thing that he does, he's gotten a really, like, he's been getting 90% of the snaps. He's been very consistent since the Corey Davis injury. Corey Davis was back last week, but he didn't play all the time. So I do worry a little bit that there is a chance that Wilson has been really good, but Corey Davis is also a very legitimate player. And then they also, there's a lot of good players that aren't playing 90+% of the snaps every week. So I think that there could be a little bit of a downswing there too. But so we'll see. We'll see how people react to that. I think that he could be. I guess it'll be a lot on how his ownership is. If he stays in this, teens range, then I think he looks pretty good. If he gets a bit higher, there's all these other things that are pretty risky to me that make me want to fade him. So he can qualify for both. Just continue to watch where we have him projected in terms of ownership over the weekend. And then let's see, another guy that I do feel pretty good about is, I don't know what quantifies as chalk exactly, but I did mention
moving target.
I did mention Devontae Adams earlier. I think he looks like a pretty good option as well.
Yeah, Devontae Adams looks good. What do you think of Justin Jefferson? We see, I'm looking at, both those guys at the top. They're expensive, but both of them actually have a little bit of positive leverage. We've got Jefferson at 11% ownership, 14% chance of being optimal. Any interest there, Steve?
Yeah, I think Justin Jefferson looks really good. He's been consistent. He's putting up like types of scores that can win the slate, no matter what. He's expensive, the same as Tyreek and Devontae Adams, which will keep his ownership down, but also makes him a little bit of a high risk. So I'll probably go over on him a fair amount and take some good shots there.
Nice. Okay. So we've talked about the chalk a little bit. Alex, I'm going to throw it back to you for any contrarian wide receivers that you like this weekend.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I mean, Drake London's always the guy that you got to worry that Atlanta won't pass the ball very much. But with Kyle Pitts, on the IR, I think the natural thing to happen is Drake London to get a higher percentage of the target. Atlanta in the last 4 weeks, they've kind of teetered between running the ball 50 to 60% of the time. So the volume is definitely the big question mark. But I think that I'm willing to take some long shots on guys like that. And then the other guy I'm kind of keying in on is Alan Lazard, where everyone's on Christian Watson because he's been on this crazy touchdown streak. But Alan Lazard has been their wide receiver one the whole year. So I'm happy to kind of just take some shots on that Green Bay offense while everyone's kind of out on Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, I think that's a really sharp call to try and go to Alan Lazard instead of Christian Watson, because I imagine Christian Watson is going to get a little bit of steam as we go into the weekend because he's just scored, I don't even know, 6 touchdowns over the past 3 games, something crazy like that. I don't know what the exact number is, but yeah, Alan Lazard seems like a good pivot there at 5,400, reasonable price tag. I like that call. Any other contrarian wide receivers you want to throw out there, Alex?
Well, because you asked, but I mean, those are my big ones. But Brandon Cooks, I guess that'd be another guy where he hasn't been getting as much playing time, but he does get targeted a lot when he's on the field, so that's a pay up to be contrarian spot.
Steve, I'm disappointed that I can't see you right now because I'm hearing that you look like a pilot. It's never occurred to me that you look like a pilot, but yeah, you can, as you say, continue, guide us to the promised land. Any contrarian wide receivers that you like this weekend?
So I think a couple that seem kind of interesting. This is kind of dependent on Justin Fields status, but I think Claypool is pretty interesting. He's had a pretty disappointing year, but with Mooney out and he's all the way down at 3,800. Claypool is a guy that a lot of Steelers fans thought was basically the best out of that group of Juju and Deontay Johnson and all those guys. And I know he's kind of fallen on tough times this year, but I think at 3,800, he's well worth a shot to take in that game, and getting like 3,800 on DraftKings, 5,500 on FanDuel. He's getting 3% ownership and 4% ownership. That's just like super cheap price, and it is a way that you can kind of get interesting with some of your lineups. And then also the other one I was kind of mentioning there with Garrett Wilson is Corey Davis. I feel a little bit like people are kind of not necessarily paying complete attention to Corey Davis appropriately. I mean, he's been a fine player for a few years now. Before he got injured, he was on the field for about 90% of the snaps the last couple of weeks, and just below that the weeks before that. And it feels like, he just kind of was getting eased back in a little bit last week. So I think that he could step back up a little bit more this week. He could he's in that same game in the Dome with Minnesota. So I think that he is pretty interesting at 4,100 on DraftKings, 55 on FanDuel, and also getting like next to no ownership as well.
My best ball teams could definitely use a Corey Davis return. I don't think he's scored any fantasy points all year. I don't know if that's true, but it certainly seems that he hasn't really done anything all year. We got a question. M. Bruno asked, and I'll stick with you, Steve. Any takes on the Kansas City wide receivers?
Yeah, so I think that one, I mentioned that like to kick off the show a little bit. I think that's like one of the most interesting spots on the slate. Just that it's really hard to stack up Mahomes with Kelsey, and then probably you want one of the receivers as well. So I think that they're not going to get probably as much appreciation as what they can. You could run it from the other side. You could run the Burrow stack and run those guys back, or you could run them as one-offs as well. So none of them are picking up a lot of ownership on either of the major sites. So I think that they look pretty good. It's just going to be a matter of if I can get them into my lineup as easily as I'd like.
Okay, then Alex, I'll ask you the same question. Do you have any preferences among the Kansas City wide receivers? Anybody that you're planning on playing at all this weekend?
Yeah, it's a little bit tricky. With Tony still questionable, like to break it down, but Marquez Valdes-Scantling is someone that I'm looking at. He's been pretty underwhelming so far. So as a contrarian player, that's what I'm looking for. But yeah, as long as like he's been pretty consistent in getting around 3/4 of the passing plays he's been running a route. So hasn't materialized into a ton. And that's the kind of guy it's like with Zay Jones, where you want to get them the week before they have that upside game. So, or sorry, the week yeah, you don't want to get them the week after their upside game.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm kind of on MVS.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. I think people understand. All right, Alex. So Steve gave his take on Chase Claypool, and we got a question from Mr. D Go Blue, if I'm reading that right. DeAndre Carter without Mike Williams or Claypool at a similar price. Do you have a preference there, Alex?
DeAndre Carter without Mike Williams or Claypool.
Yep.
That is going to be a tough one. So I guess I go with DeAndre Carter because the Chargers just like pass so much more than the Bears. And Herbert's a better passer. So I know that Keenan Allen is going to make the target share a little bit lower, but Claypool, I think it's a little bit risky because he hasn't gotten as much work in Chicago as you would like to this point. So it's not a guarantee that he gets out there every single play like you'd hope for. So I guess with Darnell Mooney out, we're looking for the next guy to step up, and Claypool's the most likely guy, but I'm not sold that's a great spot.
It's like you say though, Alex, you got to get them before they break out, right? So that's a great example of this. Potentially, this could be Chase Claypool this week. And I see Steve answered already in chat. Probably similar. His answer is why not both? Both. You can go over the field on both these guys. Yeah, they both look like pretty solid options. Steve, did you have any other contrarian wide receivers that you want to throw out there?
I'll say one other one that I'll hit on really quickly is just Mac Hollins. I mentioned that I liked the Vegas stacks earlier, so he's not someone that's super exciting, but I think he isn't getting a ton of appreciation. He's only at 5% ownership on both sites, so he hasn't really had a big game for a while. I don't think he's going to get much run up, but I think that just that Vegas stack in total, I think looks pretty good.
Yeah, definitely an interesting play. All right, well, then we will get to tight ends, defenses, and then a couple stacks. But first, let me tell you that we have a great offer for new users only. You can get full access to everything Stokastic has to offer for NFL free for 3 days. Projections, ownership, 1v1 tools, lineup generator, top stacks tool. There's zero risk because it's all free. So sign up now. The link is in the description of this video. Note that Fantasy Cruncher is an add-on and is not included in this offer. Alex, let's move on to tight ends. Looking at the chalk, the higher owned tight ends. Any high owned tight ends that you like, or any fades for you up there?
So we just got the news that David Njoku is unlikely to play this week, so that kind of puts Harrison Bryant into the conversation. We'll have to see how his ownership ends up, but it's interesting value. I think when I'm looking at the top of tight end, like he'd be the cheapest that we have confidence in. And then Kelsey, it's kind of tricky because the price point's so much different than any other tight end. There's not a ton of value to make that happen, but that's all about the rest of your lineup, because if you have 7,900 to spend on a tight end, he's a great option.
Yeah, definitely the top option if you can afford him. What about you, Steve? Any chalk that you like at tight end, or major fades for you? And as we said, chalk is definitely a moving target. None of these guys projecting for a ton of ownership. We only the highest we have is now David Njoku, who is now out, was getting 14% ownership. Maybe we see Harrison Bryant pick up some, but probably not as much as, I don't know. Do you have any thoughts, Steve, on the chalkier tight ends? Any guys you like on the high end of ownership, or major fades for you?
Yeah, I definitely thought Njoku was good, so that's unfortunate. I think Harrison Bryant will grade out pretty well for me as well. Haven't, we'll see what projections look like when we post those, but I'm guessing that'll be pretty good. I really like going the Kelsey route. I know he is so much more expensive, and I've talked a couple times about being tough to fit different guys into your lineup with salary constraints. Part of that is because I really like Kelsey. So I think I'm going to try to definitely get plenty of Kelsey. I think this is a game that's going to be high scoring. It's tough to stack. So that's, I think, going to kind of artificially keep Kelsey's ownership down a little bit. So yeah, I think I'm going to go with Kelsey as my guy that I like the best there. From a fading standpoint, probably Freiermuth, I guess. I mean, 12 as the next highest ownership. I don't know that I see him as like a great play. It feels like he's, going to be, he's like a fine play, but Pittsburgh's not really scoring that much. They are in a good spot in Atlanta, I suppose, but it just feels like that ownership is a bit too high for me.
Okay, so you think you're going to be under that 12% ownership on Freiermuth. Of course, we won't hold you to this, but that's what you expect to be.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, and then Steve, I'll stick with you for some contrarian tight ends. Any tight ends that you see that are not getting a ton of ownership that you think are going to be over the field on?
There's probably Foster Moreau, I guess. I mean, he's still kind of high owned, I suppose. He's one of the next highest ones, but he's sub 10%. So, and I'm guessing he'll actually end up being a little bit lower than this, just because what it's felt like is he's been kind of one of the sharper plays the last few weeks with Waller being out, but he just continues not to really do that well. So I feel like his ownership is probably going to end up going down over the weekend as compared to some of the players that we're talking about that's been going up. And yeah, so he hasn't had a big game. He's had a couple of touchdowns though, and he's still getting targets. So I think that he's pretty interesting for 3,600 and 5,500. That's a good price point.
Yeah, for sure. Alex, how about you? What about contrarian tight ends that you like this weekend?
George Kittle is pretty interesting. He may go overlooked because he's around guys like TJ Hawkinson and Mark Andrews, who seem a little bit better bets, but the price is pretty good. He's had some big performances this year, but last week was a little bit of a dud, so maybe people will be off him. And this game versus Miami, I feel like San Francisco may have to pass more than they're usually doing. So I feel like Kittle has some nice upside.
Okay, Eric Johnson says, all hail Greg Dulcich. Alex, are you willing to go back to Greg Dulcich this weekend?
I mean, I have nothing against Greg Dulcich. The only thing I'm worried about is Denver. It seems like their bad plays caught up with their Vegas lines, so they're only projected for 15.5 points versus Baltimore this week. So the touchdown equity is a little bit lower than I would like.
Yeah, I suppose that's true. And any other tight ends you want to talk about, Alex?
Let's see. Jordan Akins was the guy that kind of was a little bit surprising last week, so he's kind of on my radar. But
you brought up Alan Lazard as a pivot off of Christian Watson. What about Robert Tonyan? Any interest there?
Yeah, he's definitely a guy. It looks like there's pretty low ownership on him, and it's not that long ago he was like the touchdown king, so I think that's a pretty good option.
Okay, and then Jen Richards says Hurst call out game. I think this is a narrative that I missed. Did Hurst call out the Chiefs? Do you know what the narrative is there, Alex? Or
yeah,
regardless, any interest in Hurst?
I think it was something about like Justin Reed like said it was like throwing shade at guys or something. Like I don't really have any opinion about that, but usually a guy has to be good enough to dictate how they're going to perform. Hayden Hurst is a fine player, but I don't think it's like basketball where maybe to take more shots or something. It just doesn't work as well as football.
Can't just ball hog it as a tight end.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've got Hurst projected for 8% ownership at 3,500. So it looks like a pretty good play, regardless of the narrative in what could be a high scoring game. All right. I think we have covered tight end fairly well. We can just talk generally about defenses. Alex, are you taking any stands one way or another among defenses?
Taking defenses against the chalkier stacks is always interesting. So with Joe Burrow like performing like at a pretty high fantasy level, I think that going to the other side of that one and let's see, this week it's Kansas City. I think that could be one that goes a little bit under the radar.
Okay, Kansas City defense, interesting. What about you, Steve? Any defenses that you plan on taking any major stands on?
No, I think this week it looks a little bit flatter on our projected ownership right now. So I don't see anyone that I'm going to necessarily steer away from or into too much. Yeah, I think maybe like you could go with Seattle. The Rams have been a pretty good one to target in general this year. So that might be like a good one, but it's been a crazy year for defenses. We've had several that have been over 30% owned, but not this week. So I'm kind of thankful for that, to be honest.
So I used to frequently target defenses against Jared Goff just because he was so mistake prone. I don't know that he's been as mistake prone this year, but what about Jacksonville? Just as a, because that game is going to be so chalky, do you think Jacksonville could be an interesting leverage spot, the Jacksonville defense against that Detroit offense that is going to pick up some speed? Any interest there, Steve?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Definitely what I'm always looking for is these quarterbacks that are going to make, interceptions, fumbles, sacks, etc. And he certainly falls into that category. That's where I think also the Rams do that. Was kind of, I didn't talk about why, I guess, that I liked Seattle so much, but that was kind of like the major reason for that. They've just been giving up a lot of sacks throughout the year.
Sure. Alex, Nice Kevin says, nice of Alex to stream from San Diego before King of the Beach. Is that true? I didn't even notice where you were. Are you in San Diego, Alex?
Yeah, we're about to go on this catamaran cruise later today, so that should be fun. And met some of the guys here last night, and everyone's really awesome. So it's been a good week,
cool.
And hopefully we can get some King of the Beach wins here.
Yeah, right on. That's awesome. Okay. We will close it out just by talking about some stacks, just favorite contrarian tournament stacks. Alex, I'll start with you. Who's your favorite stack? If you just had to pick one for a large field tournament, who would you go with?
Just one. Let's see. I kind of it's hard to just pick one, but I guess the Jimmy G stack could be pretty interesting if you like play this one as a shootout. I think that both teams are good enough to make it happen, and not many people are anticipating that this week.
Okay. And then Steve, how about you? Who's your favorite stack for a large field tournament?
Yeah, so I think I'll say Derek Carr, and we'll go with that Vegas script still. He's not had an exciting year at all, but I think that this is maybe going to be that week that he can kind of also provide some extra leverage against Josh Jacobs, get Devontae Adams and Matt Collins combined in there, and potentially Foster Moreau. All the guys that I'm interested in, they're priced pretty well. The total is high, and yeah, fits a lot of the check boxes that I'm interested in.
Okay. Yeah, it seems like a good spot. And that was kind of predictable, right? You've been talking about that offense throughout the show. So it doesn't surprise me that you like Derek Carr and that stack for the Raiders. All right. Well, that will do it for the show. Steve, where can people find you?
Definitely on Twitter. So you can find me there on Steve Buzzard, but mostly doing all the work here. Hopefully get on some more shows every now and then, and doing all the work behind the scenes to help put out good projections for us. So really excited about this NBA season, some new products that we have coming out, and yeah, should be a good time. Just always come over and check us out at Stokastic.
Yeah, we can find you all over the tools. You can find him at the top of the leaderboard, as Mike has pointed out. Yeah, that's right. You can always find Steve at the top of the leaderboard. Also in the premium Discord, Steve often doing office hours, which is always really interesting. Every time I check in there, he's providing a lot of good insight. So check out the premium office hours Discord when Steve is in there. And then, of course, on Twitter at Steve Buzzard. Alex,
yeah,
how about
every
you?
Thursday. Every
Thursday. Okay. Every Thursday in the premium Discord. Alex, any final words? And you can tell people where they can find you as well. Also at the top. Yeah. I know that much.
Well, you have to scroll a little bit down from Steve to find me. But yeah, I think this week is going to be pretty interesting. It seems pretty wide open where you can try a lot of different things and have a good lineup, because like when there's slates like this week where there's no really great values, at least yet, that means that ownership is more important than if there's some really good chalk. So that's definitely how my approach to this is: get a little bit more off the board than a typical slate as of now. And that makes it even more fun to build lineups. So it'll be a good one. And yeah, I think the one other thing is that Jacksonville-Detroit game. That's definitely the one everyone's going to be centering around. So kind of building out a different game to be the blowout or the shootout of the week. I think that's probably where I'd start.
Okay. Actually, before we go, Steve, are you also at the King of the Beach?
I am not. Okay. So I have a ticket, so hoping to maybe Alex, you can bring it back if I get one of these top spots, but wasn't able to make it out there due to some conflicts, unfortunately.
Okay, yeah, it just occurred to me. I was like, I know Steve had the ticket to the King of the Beach, so I thought maybe we were there as well. Okay, well, you'll probably be able to find one of these guys at the top of the King of the Beach. That's one place you'll be able to find them. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. This has been a fun show. Despite my technical difficulties over here, I've enjoyed doing the show with two of the GOATs of DFS. Thanks for watching. Stick around the channel. If you haven't hit that like button, please do that. We've got High Stakes. My episode of High Stakes will be on the Stokastic YouTube channel very soon with Ben Rossa, that episode coming out this afternoon. And then later on, we've got all of our regular NBA programming live before Lock Deeper Dive. We've got a couple no-host advantage shows this afternoon. So stick around, check out the channel. And of course, all weekend, we'll be doing plenty of content. So check it out. Anyway, good luck this weekend. Let's win some money.